Chapter 18. A Treasure Hunt. Suddenly a voice boomed down over the edge of the cliff. "We're back! Where's everybody?" "John!" Mrs. Hollister cried out. "Are you all right? Is Ricky with you?" "Yes, and I have a ladder," he called. In a moment, a light metal ladder appeared down the wedge-shaped cut in the rock. First Ricky, then Mr. Hollister hurried down it. "We have wonderful news," the boy said breathlessly. "Officer Martinez captured Mr. Gross and Rattler, too." "Crickets!" Pete exclaimed. "The men confessed," Ricky added importantly. "They stole the things from Juan Deere, and Rattler hid the rug near the Pueblo, so the Yumatons would be blamed. And Mr. Gross stole Holly's bracelet." "We have wonderful news, too," Pam announced. "All the missing things are here." As her father exclaimed in amazement, another voice called down from the rim of the crevice. "I'm ready to help you, Mr. Hollister." "All right, Swift Eagle, but you'd better come down here first." When the Indian reached the bottom of the ladder, he heard the announcement and congratulated the children for finding the missing articles. Then Holly grabbed his hand and said, "We found the map to your lost turquoise mine." The governor was so astonished he was speechless. But Mr. Hollister asked, "You found it? Where?" Holly told them, while Pete showed the letter and the map. "This is amazing," Swift Eagle proclaimed. Pete related how Holly had spotted a pinnacle in the distance, which they thought might be Pilar Punta, and the Indian went to look at it. "We'll go there tomorrow," Swift Eagle promised. "I believe you've solved the mystery about the mine, and now I'll help you carry the stolen articles to the bus." What a job it was, toting the loads up the ladder and over the rough ground. But finally everything was packed into the bus. It was so full there was little room left for passengers. "I guess," Swift Eagle laughed, "that several Hollisters will have to ride with me." The children rode with the Indian, and both drivers went directly to State Police Headquarters. To their surprise, Juan Deere was there talking to Patrolman Martinez. "All your stolen goods have been recovered," Mr. Hollister told the old Indian. "They're in our bus." Tears came to Juan Deere's eyes when he stepped outside and saw the contents of the chaparral. "I'd still like to buy them," said Mr. Hollister. "Thank you," Juan Deere replied. "I like to give them to Hollisters, but I not have much money." After he and Mr. Hollister had arranged for the purchase and shipping of the articles, Pete told him about the letter and map, and the trip planned for the next morning. "I hope story true," the old Indian smiled. The children rose early the following day to prepare for the expedition. After breakfast, Swift Eagle and Officer Martinez arrived. The policeman said Rattler had admitted taking the note from a dying cowboy, who had heard the story of the buried mine from an Indian. He had foolishly told Gross about it, instead of Swift Eagle. "Let's start our venture," Sue spoke up impatiently. Everyone climbed into the bus, and Mr. Hollister said, "Swift Eagle, will you be our navigator to Pilar Punta?" He drove down the highway a short distance. Then the Indian governor told him to turn left into an overgrown side road. It wound up and down through little arroyos and sandhills. After Mr. Hollister had driven several miles, Swift Eagle told him to park. From there, the treasure hunters stumbled, crawled, and climbed among the cedars and chamisa bushes. As they came to the end of a gorge, Pam exclaimed, "There it is, Dad! I see Pilar Punta!" The pinnacle rose just ahead of them, looming majestically in the morning sun. "It's well hidden," said Swift Eagle. "The Yumatons never come out this way. That's why the pillar was not known." When they reached the base of it, Pete consulted the secret map, guiding the others in the direction the arrow indicated. "The old landslide covered this place well," Officer Martinez remarked. "If we'd come much later, I'm afraid that nature would have hidden her secret from us forever." Half a mile beyond, in a gorge, Ricky and his brother cried out together, "A cave!" To the left, partly obscured by pinyon and juniper bushes, was a tiny opening in the mountainside. The policeman flashed a light inside and reported the cave was small and bare. Looking at the map, Pete traced a line directly opposite the cave and started walking. In a few moments, he shouted to the others, "Here's the second cave!" They ran up excitedly. The opening was no larger than an Indian drum. "The clues are working," Pam said excitedly. "Next we'll find the mine." Again, Pete consulted the map and led them to the base of a steep cliff, at the bottom of which rested several huge boulders. "According to the map, it should be right here," the boy stated. "Everyone give me a hand with these boulders." The men and boys pushed against the huge stones with all their strength. Finally, the rocks yielded and rolled away, revealing a small opening. The policeman tried to look in with his light, but could see nothing. "Ricky," said Mr. Hollister, "that hole's hardly big enough for you to squeeze through, but do you want to try it?" "You bet!" The boy, taking the flashlight, wiggled inside until his feet had entirely disappeared. "Hey," he called back, "there's a big room in here and some tools." He handed out an old stone axe. "And little blue lines on the walls." "You've found our turquoise mine," Swift Eagle exclaimed joyfully. "Now we will no longer be poor." Working feverishly with the axe, stones, and their bare hands, the Indian treasure hunters enlarged the hole enough so they could all enter and gaze at the veins of turquoise. Then, with Swift Eagle and the children humming happily, they walked back through the gorge and rode to Agua Verde. "I don't know what to say to you happy Hollister children," Swift Eagle smiled, when they reached the hotel, "except to wish that you were Yumatans." "I'd like that," said Holly. "Then we could be cousins to Red Feather and Blue Feather." That afternoon, Indians with modern picks and shovels set out to start working the mine at once. Word came to the Hollisters that Indy Rhodes and Warhorse would always receive part of the profits because of their help in solving the mystery. "Goody," said Sue. "Everything's turning out happy." The next morning, every Indian in Agua Verde smiled broadly at the Hollisters as they passed by. "I think they're up to something," Mr. Hollister said to his wife. "I can tell by their faces." About noontime, a delegation of Indians led by Juan Deere came to see the Hollisters at the hotel. "Yumatans invite you to Pueblo supper tonight," the old man said. "Thank you," Mrs. Hollister replied. "We shall be happy to accept." Toward the end of the day, the streets of Agua Verde were deserted. All the Indians and many of the other townspeople had gone to the Pueblo. When the Hollisters arrived, the place was buzzing with activity. The children and their parents were ushered to the dwelling of Swift Eagle. Smilingly, he presented each one with a colorful ceremonial blanket and feathers for their hair. "Please honor us by wearing them now," he requested. At first the Hollisters were a little embarrassed, but they put on their gifts. Then, as the drums began to beat, the visitors were led to an Indian feast in the center of the plaza, where a huge fire was blazing. Over it, a whole lamb, suspended on stout sticks, was roasting. After everyone had been served large portions of this and other good things to eat, there were dances and chanting. Finally, Swift Eagle, wearing pink trousers and a purple velvet shirt, solemnly rose. Turquoise hung from his neck, and around his waist was a silver concho belt. He looked directly at the Hollisters and said, "My people have gathered tonight to perform a very unusual ceremony. Poda, will you step forward? And Red Feather and Blue Feather?" The lieutenant governor walked with dignified steps to Swift Eagle's side, a wooden bowl in his hands. The Indian children followed. "Now we are ready to make our good white friends members of the Yumatan tribe," Swift Eagle announced solemnly. "Will the Hollisters join us?" Amazed and bursting with pride, the visitors from Shoreham walked slowly to where the governor and the others stood. Swift Eagle raised his right hand, and a low chanting began in the crowd. Poda moved in front of the governor, extending the bowl to him. The Hollisters could see that it contained fine white cornmeal. Swift Eagle took a small portion in his fingers and put the grains in his mouth. His lieutenant next offered the corn to Red Feather and Blue Feather, who did exactly as their grandfather had. Poda was next. Then he passed the bowl to each of the Hollisters. They too ate a few grains of the corn. "Now I pronounce the happy Hollisters members of the Yumatun tribe," Swift Eagle proclaimed. "May this Pueblo be one of your homes as long as you live, and we hope you will come here often." The drums throbbed and the chanting continued. "Hio, hio, hio, witsnayo," was repeated over and over. The new Anglo members of the tribe were so impressed they could not say much, but they did shake hands with Swift Eagle and Poda and thank them. Then Pam, Holly, and Sue hugged Blue Feather, and Pete slapped Red Feather on the shoulder. "Now we're your really true cousins," Holly said. "Come, we will do a friendship dance," Red Feather said, leading the Hollister children to where an Indian boy sat on the ground beating a drum. "Take off your blankets if you wish." "The new Yumatuns will dance alone in a circle for a few minutes," Blue Feather said, after the children had handed the gifts to their parents. "Then we Indians will join you." Pam immediately started to dance, and Pete took up the rhythm behind her. Next came little Sue, followed by Ricky and Holly. As the Hollisters circled, Blanca fluttered overhead and landed on Holly's left wrist. This gesture of friendship was the sign for the Yumatun children to join the dance. They fell in line with the Hollisters as the grown-ups began to chant a merry tune. "Finding an Indian treasure is the most fun ever," Holly giggled, as she and her brothers and sisters danced round and round with their Indian cousins.